All right, attendees, there we go. Good evening, everyone. I'm seeing some of you all who are familiar names tonight coming to watch our Kentucky Great Writers series. Some of you all may have come and participated in our Carnegie Center Author Academy. I see some staff members. I see a Kentucky publisher in our audience tonight. I see also, where did he go? Somebody who has done our Kentucky Great Writers open mics when we're in person, and maybe we'll do those again in the fall. So it's good to see you there. I'm seeing more names as people are joining us tonight. I'm also seeing, in addition to some of the familiar names, I'm seeing some people who are, some new names to us. So if this is your first time coming to watch our virtual Kentucky Great Writers series, welcome. We're so glad to have you and hope you love tonight's event. We've got some great readers coming up. So I'm looking at some of our more of our names that are popping up here. Another person from the Carnegie Center Author Academy, and a few other familiar names here. I see a Carnegie Center donor's name who I recognize, and thank you very much for your support. I see somebody who is involved with the Lexington Writers Room, which is a really cool resource in downtown Lexington. Check it out. So we still have some people who are coming on, but we're going to go ahead and get started, and they will join us as they arrive. So good evening, everyone. I'm Jennifer Maddox. I coordinate the Carnegie Center's Kentucky Great Writers series, which features authors who either live or have lived in Kentucky and have one or more literary works of high quality. Now, before we begin our readings, I just want to introduce you to what's coming up at the Carnegie Center soon, and also let you know what you can expect for tonight. Through the end of the summer, nearly all Carnegie Center classes are going to be online, as are our mentoring sessions, our new Kentucky Black Writers Collaborative, and much more. And if you've heard me mention the name Carnegie Center Author Academy, we are actually taking just a few more people into the one that will begin this fall. And you're like, what is an Author Academy? I need to learn about this. Check it out. We have some links in our chat for you. Also, the Carnegie Center's Books in Progress Conference. It's actually coming up very soon. It's June the 4th through 6th. Our keynote is going to be award-winning poet Ada Limon, who just happens to live in Lexington. And so you definitely don't want to miss that virtual conference, especially if you're looking for a literary agent, because we have 3 literary agents and you might get a chance to pitch your book to one of them. So it's definitely something you want to check out. And if you're thinking, I don't know if I could afford this, if you need a scholarship, just ask. We would be happy to help you if we can. So to learn more, go to carnegiecenterlex.org. Now, tonight's event is sponsored by the Wrightsell Cook Foundation, Kentucky Arts Council, Lex Arts, WUKY Lexington, and also I want to give a special thanks to Nate's Coffee. Even though we're not in person enjoying their brew, hopefully maybe this fall we will. You never know. Now, after all 3 of the authors have read tonight, we're going to do a question and answer session, so you don't have to wait until the end of the night. If you have a question, there is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. You're welcome to drop your question in there at any time. Our authors won't be checking that Q&A during the event, but your question will be there and waiting when we get to the questions later. So definitely do that if you want to ask a question. And then we really want you all to support tonight's authors. And if we were in person, we'd be selling books in person, but since we can't do that, we hope that you will go to our online bookstore. It's www.bookshop.org/shop/Carnegie Center. And one of our writers on staff, Brittany, or it might have been Kimber, has dropped in that link into our chat feature for you. So it should make it very easy. And one of the benefits of us using Bookshop, at no additional cost to you, a portion of your purchase will go to the Carnegie Center and a portion will go to support local bookstores. So everybody wins. Now, this event is being recorded and will be available on Carnegie's Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. And it's later going to be rebroadcast twice on WUKY Lexington 91.3. And now we'll begin our readings. And if you're just joining tonight, again, I'm Jennifer Maddox. I'm the coordinator of the Carnegie Center's Kentucky Great Writers series. And tonight's outstanding women all grew up in Kentucky, whether it was in Appalachia or it was in the metro of Louisville. And our first reader tonight is Leesa Cross-Smith. So Leesa, please join us.
Hi.
Hi, Leesa. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
I'm good. I know you've been doing a lot of virtual events because you just had your book coming out.
Right.
How are you feeling? Are we going to exhaust you tonight, or is this something that will be like, I know this is the last one. So will this
this is one of the last ones. I like doing stuff with you. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Well, sure. You're welcome. Now, I mentioned the Metro of Louisville, and where are you today?
Louisville. That's right. Born and raised.
Anybody who's read Leesa's stuff will recognize Louisville in her writing, so which is really neat, just some of the places that she mentions. And so I'm going to tell the audience just a little bit about you, Leesa, before you begin. Now, some of you all may have heard Leesa Cross-Smith when we featured her debut novel, Whiskey and Ribbons, in the Carnegie Center's Kentucky Great Writers series a few years ago. And, I remember when we were thinking about who's going to be in that series years ago, and I opened up the book and I was just completely sucked into the first chapter. I mean, from the beginning, I was instantly hooked. It is a fantastic story. And,
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And, all her story collections are equally as engaging. And even the last one, So We Can Glow, it came out right at the start of the pandemic. And I mean, when I say right at the start, we didn't know if she was going to have this event at Joseph Beth to launch her new book. And then we waited and waited. And then like 2 days before, they had to cancel it because it was just not safe to gather in person.
Right.
So, but despite a pandemic, that did not stop her from the awards, honors, and recognitions that she's received for that collection, or even for her latest novel, which is called This Close to Okay, which it released in February. Now, if you're thinking about reading this novel, those of you who are listening or watching tonight, I'm telling you that these people say that you should, or at least the folks behind Oprah, Bazaar, Elle, Glamour, and Cosmo magazines, The Today Show, Book Riot, She Reads, and so many others. And it's a book of the month. It's both a Marie Claire and a Good Housekeeping book club selection. And so, if all these people are saying you must read it, I think they're right. So now here's a fun pandemic fact. Leesa and I actually have spent more time on Zoom than we actually have in person. It's because she and I were both taking a fun French class at the Carnegie Center. So, it feels absolutely perfect to be, introducing you tonight for a virtual reading. It's just like old times, So,
Exactamo. Right.
Perfect. Absolutely. So for our audience, I'd like to introduce you. Here is Leesa Cross-Smith.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm going to read a little bit at the beginning of the novel. I'm starting on the very first page. And quickly, I'll just say This Close to Okay is a story about a woman who encounters a man on a bridge. She's on her way home from the gym and she encounters him. He looks as if he's going to take his life, and she wants to stop him. Tally saw him drop his backpack and climb over the metal railing, the bridge, the gray Ohio River below them, a swift rippling ribbon. She was driving slowly because of the rain, the crepuscular light. She didn't give herself time to think, pulled over, lowered the passenger side window and said, "Hey, hey, hey." The haze increased in frequency, volume. To her left, the blur of traffic. She punched her hazards, climbed over the armrest, and out of her car, leaving the passenger door peeled open. "Hey, I see you. You don't know me, but I care about you. Don't jump," she said, loud enough for him to hear. But she didn't want to startle him either. The cars and trucks were loud. The rain was loud. The sky was loud. The bridge was loud. All those sounds echoing off it, rattling down and back up. The world was so loud. He turned slightly, his face wet with rain. "Hi, I'm Tally," she said. "I don't want you to do this. Is there somewhere I can take you instead? And I could take your backpack. What's your name?" She was reluctant to touch the backpack. It was dark green and dirty. She reached for it. "Don't touch it," he said softly. Far too softly for someone who was about to jump to his death. Why bother speaking softly when death is slipping its hand in your pocket? Tally put her hands out in front of her, surrendering. She wouldn't touch the backpack. Fine, a blessing. "I'm sorry, is there somewhere I could take you and maybe we could talk, or I could call someone for you? Come with me. We can figure it out," she said, her voice climbing a rickety set of stairs. She'd almost forgotten she was a licensed therapist until she said those words, "We can figure it out." And how often did licensed therapists get to do surprise on the street sessions? A lot, actually, but this one was on the bridge. She never lost a client to suicide, and she wasn't going to start now. He wasn't her client, but he could have been. She began speaking to him as if it were true. Instead of being out in the cold rain, she imagined they were in her cozy office with the calming lapis walls, the white noise machine, her chair, a basil green, the shiny honey smooth hardwood floors, the soothing soft almond suede couch. She had a scented oil diffuser on the table by the window, lavender and a hint of lemon. She'd mixed it herself. There were potted spider and Dracaena plants, bamboo palms, a monstera, succulents in the sunlight, natural air purifiers. The bookshelves were packed neat and tight with an amber salt lamp atop the one closest to the door. She pictured her office perfectly, transported herself there in her mind, willed that calm into her voice. Her receptionist's fingers gently clicked the computer keyboard. The rocky fountain bubbled in the waiting room. Her older brother, Lionel, was a big shot finance bro and had given her the money to design everything so beautifully from scratch, it made her feel guilty, like she could never do anything so important and pretty for him. She didn't want the man on the bridge to know she was a therapist with a rich, big shot brother in a calming office just yet, because that would separate them. She wanted him to think and know she was like him. They were the same. She had her share of want to jump days like everyone else, just had never made it over the railing before. No thanks. Leave me alone, he said politely, too politely for death. He hadn't completely made his mind up yet. I've had some really bad days too, some really bad days. I just went through a divorce, and before the ink was dry, I found out my ex-husband got his mistress pregnant. I can't have babies, so it was literally the worst thing that could have happened to me. He's with her now, and they have a little girl. They moved to Montana to be closer to her family. Who lives in Montana? I can't even remember where it is half the time, she said, hating that she'd used the word mistress. She usually tried to avoid it, knowing how it cast a spell she didn't intend. Mistress, with its snaky curves and Marilyn Monroe breathiness, implied so much drama and romance, it seemed desirable. I'm sorry that happened to you, he said and paused. But lots of people live in Montana. It's a regular state. I have friends who live there, his voice snapped, politeness averted. He was looking down at the river. It was cold and getting colder. Late October, the nights were getting longer. That alone made Tally start to question whether life was worth living, God turning out the lights. Autumn was okay, but winter was too brutal to tackle alone, and this would be the second winter since her divorce. Joel would be spending winter in Montana with his new wife and baby. Right. I'm sure Montana's fine. You said you had friends there. Why don't you come over to this side and tell me about your friends, Tally said, stepping closer to him. He looked at her before giving his attention back to the river. It was the first time she'd seen his face full on. He had a smattering of light freckles, like someone had accidentally spilled cinnamon across his nose and cheeks, and he was wearing a jacket the same color of his backpack. Both his jeans and boots syrupy brown. Shattered energy seemed to pulse from him like sonar, tight blips of loneliness. Tally translated the echolocation easily. She was lonesome and blipping too. We should call them. I bet they'd love to hear from you, she said, moving closer and going into her pocket for her phone. What are their names? I don't want to talk to them right now. You don't want to tell me your name or how I can help you? No, thank you. All right. Okay, she said, tapping around on her phone, wondering if there was something she could find that might help. She glanced at her car, the open door, the rain falling sideways against the seat. The dome light glowed a blurred white. She wiped her fingers dry, tapped around some more. Have you heard this song? I love this song, she said, turning it up, stepping closer to him. She was on the safe side of the railing. He was on the suicide side. She doubted he would be able to hear the music. It was a loud world. She was only a bit surprised no one else stopped. No one else pulled to the side and said, hey. Everyone always thought everyone else would take care of things. A nervous tick motion of the head to the left by Andrew Bird played from her phone. She thought past the title having the word nervous in it, but early in the song he sang the word died, so she waited until that part had passed and only turned it up once Andrew began to whistle. It was a quirky song with lots of whistling. She'd been flicking through the musical artists in alphabetical order and skipped ABBA, although I Have a Dream with its hopeful lyrics about believing in angels wouldn't have been the worst choice. One scroll past ABBA was Andrew. She stretched her arm out so the phone would be closer to his ear. This guy, his name is Andrew Bird, and he's whistling like a bird in the song. It's a pretty song, but I don't know what it means, she said. The rain was wetting her hoodie, her cold hand, the phone. This man must have been freezing if he'd been on the bridge for even a short amount of time. She asked how long he'd been standing there. I don't know, he said, still looking down. She let the song play, stopping it before Andrew Bird said the word died again, and she put the phone into her pocket. I'm sure you're very cold. There's a coffee shop up the road. We could go get a coffee. I'd love to buy you a coffee. Would you let me buy you a coffee? She asked. He could be a murderer. He could be a rapist. He could be a pedophile on the run. You don't want to tell me your name? I told you mine. I'm Tally Clark. No, he said, soft. The world was loud and hard, but he was soft. Would you like something warm to hold or drink? I can't leave you here. I won't do that, Tally said. She could reach out and touch him, but was afraid. He could jump, he could fall, he could grab her and not let go, take her with him. She didn't want to go. Play another song, please, he said. Tally searched for Jesus, etc. by Wilco, a song she'd always found comforting, and held her phone out for the man to take. They stood there listening to Jeff Tweedy's flannel, languid voice together. She hugged herself for a moment in attempt at warmth before tucking her hands into the kangaroo pocket of her hoodie. Thank you, he said, handing her the phone back once the song was over. She looked at the highway, the flashing gloss of minivans, SUVs, pickup trucks, four doors, no police cars, no fire trucks, no ambulances. She didn't know what to do and told him that. Maybe it would make him feel better, knowing no one had all the answers. And if he was going to jump, he surely would have jumped already, right? Right. You don't have to do anything. It's done, he said. What's done? What's going on? I don't know, he said. It made her want to laugh, the humanity and honesty of him saying, I don't know. Tally prayed to herself. Jesus, you see us. You know us. Let this man know. Let him find a reason to stay. Surround both of us. Let me be able to do this. Abide with us. She held her hand out for him, shaking, wet, cold. He looked at her, the river, her. The backpack was at her feet. He was looking at the river, and he was looking at the river. He was looking at the river when he took her hand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leesa. Another novel, that first chapter, it just draws you right in. You want to know what happened. So thank you so much for that reading. Next, we have Karen McElmurray. So Karen's joining us now. There she is. Hi, Karen. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Here in my little study, crowded with everything.
Now, where are you located? What city and state are you located right now?
I live in Maryland in a town called Catonsville. It's right sort of between DC and Baltimore, closer to Baltimore, but it's its own small town.
And where in Kentucky did you grow up?
I went to high school in Frankfort. When I was a kid, we lived in Allen in Floyd County and also in Harlan County. And then later I lived with my granny in Johnson County. My mom, her whole life lived in Floyd County. So various, but those are the places.
You know more of Kentucky than I do. I'm a Bourbon County girl. I've been here my whole life. That's where I am now. So
My
yeah.
dad used to go to Bourbon County for, he worked for the education department. He would go there for business trips all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, that's my hometown. So yeah. Well, let me tell the audience just a little bit about you, Karen. Now, the first time Karen and I actually met, it was when the Carnegie Center had a different reading series, and it was called New Books by Great Writers. And Karen, that was back when you had Motel of the Stars. I mean, it's
Oh,
probably over a decade ago by now, I guess.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd already knew that Karen was a great writer, and I'd heard also that she was an outstanding writing instructor. And this reputation is as true today as it was then. She's one of those authors who's found success in both fiction and in nonfiction, winning awards such as the Association of Writers and Writing Professionals Award and the Chafin Award for Appalachian Writing. Among her books is Surrendered Child, A Birth Mother's Journey, which author Lee Smith calls a dark memoir that is an enlightening and redemptive work of art. Now, Karen's most recent novel, Wanting Radiance, was published by the University Press of Kentucky in April 2020, another one of these pandemic books. And, I love this blurb from the author Josephine Humphreys, who says about Karen's novel, that it is like inhabiting the best country music song you've ever heard, the high, lonesome, heartbroken, wanting and not having sort of song, with the added feature of a tough, smart guide who sees deep and who can say, I ached with lonely and I wanted to be alone and I wanted nothing at all to do with my own self. Now, That sounds like a story, quite a story. So I think all of us now are wanting to hear more about this. So maybe we'll hear from that book itself. So I give you Karen Salyer McElmurray.
Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you so much to the Carnegie Center for arranging this event for all of us. And most of all, thanks to Leesa and Alix for sharing this space with me. It means a lot to me. Leesa, you used the word abide in what you read, one of my favorite words ever. I am going to read this evening from Wanting Radiance, which Jennifer mentioned. It's a book that's about many things, everything from fortune telling to ghosts to lost love. And another thing that it's about is family, what it means to be part of a family, not part of one, and also what it means to pry open the locks of family secrets. I'm going to read two short sections from the book. And the first one takes place in 1957, and it is the night on which Miracell Loving, she's the main character in this book, and this is the night on which she's born. And so she, in fact, remembers that night. And I think the only other name you'd need to know here is Esther. Two names, Esther, who is Miracell's grandmother, and Ruby, who was her mother. On the day she was born, everything tasted of rust. The hours ticked by with gray sheets of rain, the window glass bowing in, out, each time she breathed. Esther was so thin by then, she was a taut wire standing by the bed, and Ruby did not know which of them held up who. Her mother's hands pushed against her stomach, and Ruby called upon the Lord. The Lord, Esther said, between the knives of hurting, the Lord had nothing to do with it. And for this you loved, her daddy said. Her whole self tore open, and she saw herself reaching inside the tear. The world was a card that turned into an open palm. The world was a tower, a lightning bolt cutting through the cloth that is the heavens. The world smelled like blood, alive and red. The world became a revelation, a before and after, a dream of what had never been but might. And in that dream, she reached across the far space of the room. She reached into the far space inside herself and felt other hands there, her daughter's hands, her child waiting to come alive. Ruby dreamed about gods, a god of pomp and circumstance, a god of thrones and angels. But as time passed, the dreams shifted. God became a woman, not Mary, neither the mother of Jesus, nor Mary Magdalene, nor anything in between. In her dreams, God was a woman with hands that had worked hard, thin hands, strong and sure of themselves. As she gave birth to her daughter, Ruby's hands became songs. Her fingers became slender strings stretching across some sky, paler blue than heaven. She reached up and plucked the strings, and the sound was pure as it had never been before, pure as slivers of glass. And thus was born on the same day as her own flesh was born. Mother bore daughter, daughter was born, both of them seeking the same roads out. Miracell was a way and a light all its own, and she named her that, a name that sounded like miracles, Miracell. The name was a way and means, and the child was so beautiful Ruby wanted to lick her clean, but she held her instead, washed her in a kitchen pan. Remember this, Esther said, there are only so many ways to baptize in this world. So that is, again, the night on which Miracell Loving is born, the central character. In this next section, we move way forward in time. It's 1993. And in this later portion of the book, Miracell's in her 30s, and she's gone on an extended road trip, a journey, to find out who she is, and most important to her, to find out who the father she's never known is. In this part, she is in a small town called Radiance. That's from the title of the book. and she is talking to, or has been talking to for that evening, a fiddle player named Leroy Loving, and she believes with all her heart that Leroy Loving is her father. And she doesn't know yet that he is not, but she's searching, but she thinks this man is. After a while, Leroy Loving quit talking. He lay back on the bed and seemed to be asleep. Then I eased open a chest at the foot of the bed, found a wool blanket. Outside the wind had risen, and I could hear rain hitting against the side of the house. I wrapped myself in the blanket and stood over the bed and looked down at him, remembering a song. This old man, he played too. He played knick-knack on my shoe. He was an old man sleeping. I'd imagined fathers aplenty. Father sounds, tobacco spit into a can, maybe a knife-shaven cedar. A fancier father than that, one with pointy shoes and a skinny tie to dance me around the floor. Or maybe a kind man, some father folding my clothes fresh off the line, hiding a $20 bill in a pocket to feed me come hunger, come need. You there, he'd have said to me, you stay safe now. Time and again, father standing on a porch, calling out to me as I rode away. Nothing is as it seems, Miracell. I knew that voice. My mother's, Ruby's ghost speaking to me as she did as I watched the man that might be my father sleep. White hair, pale scalp so tender, whiskers yellow at the edges of his mouth. Rain fell hard. How did the house of a childhood you'd never known sound in the dark? Scratching of tiny claws inside a wall and the small ticking of a clock. I knew the sounds I wanted, sounds that had taken me miles and miles and years to this very house. Hands made a sound as they brushed your hair, touched your face. Whose hands? Ruby's, my mother's, soft as cream. Or Cody Black's, that boy I loved, calluses on his palms along my belly. Other hands, far, far back, rest now. A grandmother. Memory showed me hands touching the leather cover of a Bible, touching the surface of water that would wash me clean. Oh, how I had wanted it. The sounds family made. You get on home now. Sometimes I remembered voices from a house calling me home before supper time. Or choral words. A mother and father and their words striking sparks on the other side of a wall at night. I'd wanted even that. What would a father have said to me as I drove down one more highway and slept for a night in some strange dark? Girl, get on home. I took out more blankets, made a spot for myself, curled up in it like a critter finding its way back to a hearth. I hadn't been asleep an hour when the sounds called out to me. Words about sweetness rose up from the center of the room, circled the high ceiling. Riffs high up and low. Music. The whisper scratch of horsehair drawn against strings. And underneath that, words that pulled me up from sleep. Come awake, little darling, come awake and hear the rain. Against those words, the rise and fall of chords, the gentle saw of bow and fiddle, the tap of a boot against a floor. This man who could be my father, his voice was gut deep and hurting, real as earth and bitter too. Bow and fiddle, strings and rosin, a sound beyond ears and mouth, a sound that winged and circled, a holy bird, a ghost over the floor where I'd slept. Wings fanned my face, and I wanted the scent of roses. The taste of tears held back in my throat. Bittersweet sounds traveled across my eyes, found their way to the center of my chest. Beyond radio or love songs, beyond honky-tonk or blues, music. Dreamed or not, this man played to me as I slept. He played Song of Solomon and hymns, Holy Ghost and emptiness. And so I drank the music in, as if I'd been thirsty my whole life long. Thank you.
Karen, thank you so much. That was so beautifully written. Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing that
A little
with us.
out of context, but so I'm glad it read all right.
It did. It read very well. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So next we have Alix Harrow, who's going to be joining us, and Alix E. Harrow is actually how she has her name on the books. So Alix, let's see here. There you are.
Am
Hello.
I here? Hi.
Hi. So where are you joining us from today?
Berea, Kentucky.
Berea. Oh, love Berea. Such a beautiful place. Now I know at one time you were a history professor, but that was at EKU, right? Not at Berea?
Yeah, and not a real professor. I was an adjunct instructor. I only have my master's.
Yeah. Well, you were still an instructor. You were still a teacher. So, well, I'm going to tell the audience just a little bit about Alix, and she and I actually have only met one time in person, I think, and it was interesting. So when Erin Morgenstern was launching her new book, The Starless Sea, that was the book that came out after the Night Circus, Joseph Beth was doing an event in which they had her in conversation with somebody, and the person who got to be in conversation with her was Alix Harrow. So, and Alix, you were phenomenal. It was such a good event, such a nice evening, and I got to meet Alix later. And I've read her debut, 10,000 Doors of January. Absolutely one of the most gorgeous book covers I've ever seen. But also, once you read this, and you'll find a fantastical world that you'll want to return to time and again. And it's no wonder it's been nominated for the Hugo, Nubula, Locus, and World Fantasy Awards. And I've since learned a little bit more about Alix. I've seen her on Twitter. I've seen some of her posts on there, or either maybe Instagram. And one of the cool things is she has a writing shed near some woods, which I think every writer needs. So I just absolutely love that idea. And she's also won a Hugo Award for short fiction, best short fiction in 2019. Her most recent novel is called The Once and Future Witches, and it has inspired some really cool fan art. So go check out her Twitter and Instagram feeds to see that. And, for that book, it's knowing a little bit about Alix now, I could see how she used her history degrees and then a love of witches, and then also strong female characters to create this latest novel, which tells the story of suffragist witches. Get that, suffragist witches, how perfect, who have much more to overcome than just their fight to vote. It weaves together magic long thought to be lost forever from times when women were more powerful than they were 100 years ago when the story was set. Now, there's so much to love about this novel, but you may hear some about it tonight. I don't know what Alix is going to read, but I give you Alix Harrow.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I am going to read from the Once and Future, which is just the very beginning. But then, because I don't think Jennifer will stop me, I was going to read the beginning of my novella that's coming out this October, which is totally different and pretty fun. So they'll both be really short. It'll be fine. All right, so it starts like this. There's no such thing as witches, but there used to be. It used to be the air was so thick with magic you could taste it on your tongue like ash. Witches lurked in every tangled wood and waited at every midnight crossroad with sharp-toothed smiles. They conversed with dragons on lonely mountain tops and rode rowanwood brooms across full moons. They charmed the stars to dance beside them on the solstice and rode to battle with familiars at their heels. It used to be that witches were wild as crows and fearless as foxes because magic blazed bright and the night was theirs. But then came the plague and the purges. The dragons were slain and the witches were burned, and the night belonged to men with torches and crosses. Witching isn't all gone, of course. My grandmother, Mama Mags, says they can't ever kill magic because it beats like a great red heartbeat on the other side of everything. That if you close your eyes, you can feel it thrumming beneath the soles of your feet. Thump, thump, thump. It's just a lot better behaved than it used to be. Most respectable folk can't even light a candle with witching these days, but us poor folk still dabble here and there. Witch blood runs thick in the sewers, the saying goes. Back home, every mama teaches her daughters a few little charms to keep the soup pot from boiling over or make the peonies bloom out of season. Every daddy teaches his sons how to spell axe handles against breaking and rooftops against leaking. Our daddy never taught us shit except what a fox teaches chickens: how to run, how to tremble, how to outlive the bastard. And our mama died before she could teach us much of anything. But we had Mama Mags, our mother's mother, and she didn't fool around with soup pots and flowers. The preacher back home says it was God's will that purged the witches from the world. He says women are sinful by nature and that magic in their hands turns naturally to rot and ruin, like the first witch Eve who poisoned the garden and doomed mankind, like her daughter's daughters who poisoned the world with the plague. He says the purges purified the earth and shepherded us into the modern era of Gatling guns and steamboats, and the Indians and Africans ought to be thanking us on their knees for freeing them from their own savage magics. Mama Mag said that was horseshit, and that wickedness was like beauty, in the eye of the beholder. She said proper witching is just a conversation with that red heartbeat, which only ever takes three things: the will to listen to it, the words to speak with it, and the way to let it into the world. The will, the words, and the way. She taught us everything important comes in threes: little pigs, billy goats gruff, chances to guess unguessable names, sisters. There were three of us Eastwood sisters, me and Agnes and Bella, so maybe they'll tell our story like a witch tale. Once upon a time, there were three sisters. Mags would like that, I think. She always said nobody paid enough attention to witch tales and whatnot. The stories grannies tell their babies, the secret rhymes children chant among themselves, the songs women sing as they work. Or maybe they won't tell our story at all because it isn't finished yet. Maybe we're just the very beginning, and all the fuss and mess we made was nothing but the first strike of the flint, the first shower of sparks. There's still no such thing as witches, but there will be. Okay, that's my first one. See, it was short, it was fine. And this is a novella that's coming out this year from Tor.com. And it's, I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, but it's a perfect and flawless film. And the idea is that all the different Spider-Men from all the different retellings kind of collide together. And so I did that to the story of Sleeping Beauty. So this is all the Sleeping Beauties colliding together. And I'm going to read the very first page of that, if that's okay. And I'm sorry, there is a little bit of swearing again in this one. That's just who I am as a person. Sleeping Beauty is pretty much the worst fairy tale, any way you slice it. It's aimless and amoral and chauvinist as shit. It's the fairy tale that feminist scholars cite when they want to talk about women's passivity in historical narratives. She literally sleeps through her own climax, as my favorite gender studies professor used to say. Double entendre fully intended. Jezebel ranked it as the least woke Disney movie of all time, which in a world where The Little Mermaid exists is really saying something. Ariel might have given up her voice for a dude, but Aurora barely uses hers. She has a grand total of 18 lines in her own movie, fewer than the prince, the villain, or any of the individual fairy godmothers. Even among the other nerds who majored in folklore, Sleeping Beauty is nobody's favorite. Romantic girls like Beauty and the Beast. Vanilla girls like Cinderella. Goth girls like Snow White. Only the dying girls like Sleeping Beauty. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. That was a fun sneak peek for that. I was wondering about that novella, so that's really exciting to hear some of it tonight. So thanks again to Alix Harrow. Thank you to Karen McElmurray and to Leesa Cross-Smith for your readings tonight. Now we're going to do our question and answers. So if I can get all of our authors to turn on their mics and their cameras. Very good. And we've got a few questions that people are popping into our Q&A function of this. And so I'm going to ask, and I think actually that I think even though this question here is really for Alix, I think that some of you, Leesa, I know might do some historical research, but you can consider, are the 90s historical? Some people say it is getting to be historical.
No, don't you dare. Don't you dare.
So, but all of us do a little bit, I think, in our writing to check out what was going on a few years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So the question is, how do you balance writing the story with the historical research? And that was originally for Alix. I'll let her go first, but I'm going to give Karen and Leesa a chance to answer that as well.
The first answer is that I cheat, and I mostly have written historical stuff in the time period that I studied in grad school because I'm a fundamentally lazy person. And The second answer is that I also cheat by adding magic and therefore giving myself permission to make it an alternate history. Like especially for the ones in future, which is more than 10,000 Doors of January, like I gave myself permission to just kind of put the events that I cared about all in one summer in one fictional city. So I got to have the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire happening at like the same time as the fight to vote, and like all these things all smooshed together. So I cheat.
Yeah, I really don't. I don't have to do a lot of that same sort of thing. But Alex, I really like your answers because that's the exact same thing I would do.
Just make it up. It's fiction for a reason.
Yep.
I'm sure I probably cheat too. That's really fun in the writing of fiction. I think that I also pick things, I'm writing characters and I know the story. I know the emotional interaction with the characters. I know stuff that's happening. And then I come to realize that the stories are set in particular times and places. Like my first novel, some of it was set in the Great Depression. And and then the research began as a result of that. And I'm looking up stuff about the Great Depression, and I'm looking up about the Works Project Administration, and I'm looking up what people wore, and I'm looking up whether buttons existed or whatever. The research comes sort of as a result of, rather than beginning. Maybe it's both. I guess it's beforehand, but it really is a matter of as I go. Alex, you're nodding.
Yeah, it's as you go. And it's also, I find myself doing it more as a tool of procrastination than necessity. So like
Oh,
I'll be writing a scene, I'll be like, wait, I think I need to know what the average wage for a laundress was in 1893. I think before I can move forward. But that's usually a lie.
and then you find a whole new book as a result.
Now, here's a good question, which I'm very intrigued to know the answer about too for all three of you. Tell us about a silver lining of COVID. Did anything new, unexpected, or amazing happen related to your writing? Looking for inspiration for a friend, says this person.
Who wants to go?
Related to writing, I mean, maybe kind of. I just was finishing my books. So at the beginning of COVID, I was kind of working on the short story, and then I decided to make it into a book, and then was able to sell it, and then was also able to sell it, something else or stuff I can't talk about all the way. But what I'm saying is that I did get some things done but I probably would have gotten those done anyway. But it was nice to get them done in the middle of, a lot of other things. So yeah, that's been a thing. The way I work naturally didn't really change at all because I always work at home. I can't work out or anything like that. So that part of my writing life didn't change. And then, I had those other things I was working on, but then I also had to turn in a book. I had to turn in This Close to Okay. So I had to finish that book. So like my work didn't stop at all. And man, it was in a way a silver lining because everything else was weird and different, but that part of my life didn't change at all.
I feel like successfully completing work during the pandemic is like, you deserve a medal. Like
Yeah.
you did it. We did it.
I know. Yeah, exactly. Seriously. I agree.
I found it difficult to write during the pandemic. Just feeling the weight of everything. On the other hand, this book came out in April, just as the pandemic became the thing that we were all taken up by. So I ended up spending a lot of time doing this kind of thing, trying my best to promote the book and get the word out there and do conversations and readings and pursuing this and that. It's really hard. It was at once difficult and hard to be in retreat in my home. And the silver lining is that I love it. I found that boy, do I love retreat. I could easily turn into Emily Dickinson. I'm already got the white, I'll just do this and glide through the halls. But I loved it. I loved that. But it was also really hard having the book come out then. So that was the work I did, a lot of it. And I also wrote essays. I'm real blessed by that.
Yeah, there were
Yeah.
definitely some mixed blessings with COVID
Oh,
era, and who hopefully we'll be back in person though again soon. So
Yeah.
uh,
I mean, I will add that the best thing for me was getting to talk with other writers that I definitely would not have gotten to do events with otherwise, because I'm just not like a traveling person. I have a 2 and 4 year old. Like, we
oh,
don't go places easily. And so I got to like attend conferences and do conversations like this way more often than I would in real life. Real life.
because of Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's definitely a lot easier to get Karen here tonight instead of having to have her travel all the way down here. So that's definitely a perk for this. So now Lisa was talking about something that was actually a question I wanted to ask. So readers are always dying to read the next book by one of their favorite authors. So, but flipping that, as you as the author, once your book is turned in and you've got like a year, you've got several months before that book is coming out, what is the hardest part of waiting for you all?
I've been on a weird cycle, but so I don't really have time. So I've been on a hardback. So It Can Glow came out in March 2020. This Close to Okay came out in February 2021, and then I have paperbacks, and then I have another hardback that comes out next summer. So I really haven't had like any of the waiting like I did before. My first book came out in 2014, my second in 2018, and then my third came out in 2020. So that was more of like waiting. But now, since I'm kind of on this cycle of like a year, I don't have those same things at all. I have a lot of work to do. So I take my like 2 weeks at a time. And after this, I'm gonna be out on, take a little break. But yeah, I mean, I remember what that part of it was like for sure.
You mean waiting for the book to be released? Waiting for, yeah. Well,
Right. That, the anxiety of people haven't read and you just start, when it's first out there. Yeah, I remember what that was like a lot. It's been different. This has just been weird because my first books with major publishing houses all came out during the pandemic. So the whole thing is weird and different for me, but it's been great. And I've been really blessed to keep doing it this way. But yeah, I don't have that buffer in between books like I used to at all. So it's just like one big cycle, which is nice because it benefits me when it comes to hardbacks, paperbacks. And if someone, I talk to my publishers about this, because if someone's like, oh, because I had a book of short stories, and if short stories aren't your thing, then I have a novel, and I just had a novel come out, and if that, I have another novel coming out. So it's like, okay, there's a lot going on right now. I'm good with that. I can pedal down, do all that, and then I'll go to the beach or something.
and I felt a lot of stuff going on too. As I say, there was my attempt to promote this book online
Mm-hmm.
during the pandemic, but there's exciting stuff too. It's been a lot. Before the novel was accepted for publication, I had signed on with a small press in Knoxville called Iris Books, and they have released a collection of essays of mine. Actually today, actually Thursday, it will happen. It's called Voice Lessons. So I was, working on galleys for that. And then I'm really fortunate that Wanting Radiance will be released in paperback in November. So it's a lot of events happening. So I've
Right.
been in sort of the overwhelm of, a lot of going on. So
Yeah.
I'm sort of eager to have another kind of waiting. Maybe what Lisa's saying, I want to go to the ocean. I just want to wait for wait and not have any
Yeah.
other thing that's coming to
Yeah.
yeah.
What about you, Alex?
No, it's the same. I had debuted in 2019, but the book came out in September. My second book was due in like December, so I was just writing that the whole time.
Right.
And then the next book
Right.
came out in 2020, and then between paperbacks and novellas, and I write short stories still. There's always something happening. Like,
Right.
I just realized, like, I don't know, a week ago or something, that the paperback for Once and Future Witches and this novella come out on the literal same day. I had not
Oh,
known
wow.
that. I was like, oh man, I put this on my calendar without realizing. I'm doing great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Alex, you are doing amazing because you have a 2 and a 4-year-old, and my kids are teenagers, and it's like I cannot, like when they were 2 and 4, I cannot. I wasn't even reading
Oh,
like
my
reading a
husband
book.
is raising them, just to be clear. Like, he's putting them down tonight. He made dinner tonight. Like, it's
Well, that's awesome. Good. You chose well. That's the way it should be. But that's awesome because my kids are teenagers, and it's like now I feel so free. And Karen, I was gonna say, I love to both of you all. I really enjoyed listening to you guys. I loved listening to your work, and I love hearing authors read their work. Period. Anyway, Karen, my daughter's name is Ruby, so I especially was like very special. Yeah.
Now, here's a question for all three of you. All three of you all have stories with layers, not just in plot, but in the way that you describe a setting, a fictional world, or a time period. And what do you use for inspiration or to set a mood for your story? Do you have a music playlist? Do you look at certain photos, or is there something else?
Can I go? The layering thing interests me a whole lot. I mean, the layering thing, the inspiration came from um, a friend of mine, Carlisle Petit, is a printmaker, and our work influenced one another with our work. And a print is made literally with running a layer through a press, another layer through a press. And we talked so much about making our work that I began to think in that layered way. So, I mean, that's definitely an inspiration. And I was, bigger than that. The inspiration comes from all kinds of other writers and visual artists. I'm greatly, greatly inspired by visual work, for sure. And then I'm also inspired by, like, long walks with my dog. There's that. And y'all, what about you guys?
Yeah, I'm the same with visual art. There's a lot of so the characters in my book really bond over their love for art and art museums. Tally, my character, she just loves going to the art. She goes to the art museum every Sunday. It's a really important thing for me, especially when I finish a book, because everything is text and it's black and white text. And so, especially after I turn a book in, I like to go to the art museum. It's a totally different way for me to experience the world. And my next book that comes out next summer, it's about a woman named Vincent, and her name is Vincent after Vincent van Gogh. Like, so it's like that's a huge heart. I have a huge heart for that. And the same with walks. That's how I figure out the structure of my books. Usually I just start walking and end up back home eventually. Like, I just walk and walk and walk. That's something I like to do. When it comes to, so with This Close to Okay specifically, it was, I needed a really comforting space because I have a character who's really still throughout the entire book considering taking his life. And so Tally is really trying to create this comforting space for him. So they're also both keeping secrets from each other, and it's told from two different points of view. So that layering was easy for me. When it came to my first novel, Whiskey and Ribbons, I didn't know how to write it. So I ended up writing it as a piece of music. I wrote it as a fugue because we have a character who dies in the first sentence. So it's like, a fugue is a piece of music that has three voices and one voice drops out. And when I saw that, like, it all came together. I was on a 3-mile walk, and then I finally was like, that's how I have to do it. So those layers it's not something I set out to do, really. It just happens when I'm writing a book. I always have like a playlist. It's part of like book promo. I always do a playlist. The playlist is actually going to be in the back of the paperback version of This Close to Okay, and it's available online on my website and everything. But yeah, it's the kind of thing that just happens. That's how I know something is really working for me. I can't imagine being able to write a book without it having like all those different levels to it, so that you can get to know the character, so you can know where they are, so you can know how they're feeling. And I just love complicated emotions and stuff like that anyway. It's just like human, just real. It's just how we feel even when we can't figure it out. I love that in all of my art. So when it comes to just films and different books that I like to read in any sort of art, I love really complicated, sort of messy, just humans trying to figure out how to be human. That'll just always gets me to the page anyway.
I love what you say about music. Plot. I don't think readily in plot. I think in movements, sort of movements of this sort of experience of a character, the inner experience of the character laid next to this experience, and then plot sort of comes from that, from the movements. Alix, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm not a visual or really even an audio person. Like, I want to be, but usually I assemble the Pinterest board like after the book is written, and I'm like wanting to communicate it to other people more than like wanting to inspire myself. I just listen to the same song on a loop. Like, The main thing I do for inspiration is probably comes from a holdover from grad school. I make like a syllabus for myself of like books
Wow.
that is almost like this, what I'm trying to write. And then I like right now I'm trying to do a Southern Gothic kind of a fantasy thing. And so I'm just like reading, assigning myself a history of Southern Gothic lit.
Yeah.
And
Wonderful.
so it's like a collage of other better writers is mostly what my layers come from.
Could you
I
say what?
steal.
I have to ask you a question. Could you say where the witches story came from? What was the inspiration for the witches? Which I just love that novel so much.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll tell you the truth, it's not admirable, but I wrote a short story with witch librarians that was like cute and little and it did well. And my husband was like, dude, you should just do witch everything, like witch mail carriers and witch trash deliverers and witch activists. And I was like, haha, wait, that's such a good idea. uh, and so I sold the book on the 3-word pitch of like, what if suffragists, but witches? And it
Yeah.
took a lot more work to get from 3 words to a novel, it turned out.
Yeah.
But what a great idea. Thank you all for those answers. I was just eating that stuff up. I love hearing these behind the scenes stories, things that are going on in your minds that maybe no one will ever know that you're thinking these things or that you're inspired by these things. But I think that just really makes the story even richer too, because now that we know this, we go back and we read that and we're like, oh yeah, there it is. There's Lisa's fugue. And, and there's this painting and the layers. And of course, witches and suffragists. I mean, love it. So I'm going to ask one final parting question for tonight. And I'm going to say this because we do have people who will be listening. Not everybody will be watching our Kentucky Great Writers broadcast. So I do want to say that for those of you all who want to learn more about Leesa Cross-Smith, her first name is spelled Leesa. Alix's first name is spelled Alix, but Karen's is spelled as you would expect, Karen. So that's definitely one thing I wanted to throw out there. And then if you all don't mind to mention where people can learn more about you, whether that's social media, it's a website, or another place.
You can find me on Twitter like all the time. It's a problem. Alix E Harrow on Twitter.
I relate to the problem, but my problem is Facebook. I'm Karen and I'm a Facebook. I mean, truly, Facebook is and I've lately taken up with Instagram. So you can find me either of those places. And I also have a website. And I'm very proud that this very week, it's Wix, and I've taught myself the updating of my website. I was really proud that I could do that. It's KarenSalyerMcElmurray.com.
Yeah, I'm an LEE, so it's LeesaCrossSmith.com. I'm also Leesa Cross-Smith everywhere. On Instagram, I'll post pictures of pretty things that I like, and on Twitter, I occasionally talk about publishing, but mostly I talk about K-pop and K-dramas and BTS.
Well, and thank you all. And for those of you all who are watching our Zoom version, in the chat window right now, we're dropping in some links about some of the programs that I mentioned early in our broadcast. And then also, where you could buy books from these wonderful authors. I mean, they were, one of the things I loved about these books is they were full of wanting, whether it was full of, wanting to help, full of wanting to know answers, or full of wanting to have power in this world and to make a difference. So, I mean, it was just a wonderful night of readings. Thank you, ladies, so much. And, I do want to tell our audience, again, I mentioned that we'll be rebroadcasting this, so you can watch the video up on Carnegie Center's Facebook page or our YouTube channel, and then also on Lexington radio station, WUKY 91.3 FM. They will rebroadcast this twice, sometime probably in June would be my guess. So thank you to our audience for coming. Thank you to our authors so much for sharing your works. And I know that we're going to be seeing more from all 3 of you in the future. So thanks, everybody. Everyone have a good night.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Good to see you all.
Good to see you.